the hard truth is, as we know from these previous episodes, when Zelensky didn't like the way things were going, he can simply say, I'm not going to do it. Now, that means fighting on without the same level of American assistance. But, as we were hearing on that clip from J.D. Vance, American assistance in and of itself is tapering anyway. And the same goes for Europe. I mean, you can sideline Europe and you can brandish some kind of agreement in Alaska, but a lot of the key sanctions, and Russia is looking for sanctions relief in this process, are those imposed by Europe. So you've got to get them on side, both the Ukrainians to make a peace work, clearly, and the Europeans.
Let's start, of course, with the looming meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska. It's planned for Friday. First up, just how this looks, which is like the latest in a long line of historical carve-ups of territory where the country that's being carved up isn't allowed anywhere near, right?
That's what's called a leading question. I thought, given that a lot of what we've got to talk about this morning is probably quite downbeat and difficult, let's start with some comedy.
Okay.
I mean, is the whole meeting happening on a misunderstanding? I mean, this is this idea that Steve Witkoff went to Moscow, talked to Putin. Apparently, he goes in, without a bag carrier, and on a previous trip, he went in without his own interpreter. So we don't know whether he had his own interpreter, and emerged apparently with a misunderstanding that Russia was prepared to give up certain territory in Ukraine in order to get peace. Then, when the European countries were following up with calls to their counterparts in Washington over the days that followed, the story started to wander all over the place. Had Putin agreed to this or hadn't he? Obviously, the Russians saying they hadn't. So it's possible that this whole thing is happening under a misapprehension, which is that Putin is willing to trade, is willing to give up some of the Ukrainian land that his forces have conquered in order to stop this. Now, so the whole thing could be a nothing burger.
It would be very Trump to... I mean, one doesn't wish to directly accuse the President of the United States of lying when on the radio, but it would be very Trump to be like, well, we've been assured they'll do this, and they've been assured of no such thing, but they're just trying to force that. They're trying to force that agenda. That is how Trump sort of generally does things, isn't it?
Well, I mean, he wants to sell it as a historic moment, come what may. And it's true, the last time a Russian Putin visited America was in 2007. So these are not exactly commonplace meetings. J.D. Vance yesterday, I thought, was spinning it in quite an interesting way, which was simply to say that just to get the meeting, and then the promised follow-on, at which he insists Zelensky will be present, is the achievement. So I thought there was a bit of expectation management going on there.
Let's hear J.D. Vance. We've got a clip of him speaking on Fox News yesterday, taking a break from his summer holiday in the Cotswolds.
I think the president, and I certainly think that America, we're done with the funding of the Ukraine war business. We want to bring about a peaceful settlement to this thing. We want to stop the killing. But Americans, I think, are sick of continuing to send their money, their tax dollars to this particular conflict. But if the Europeans want to step up and actually buy the weapons from American producers, we're okay with that, but we're not going to fund it ourselves anymore.
I mean, that's very Vance. It's talking about what it means for America, never mind what it means for Ukraine or anywhere else. Look, the whole concept of Putin giving up land for peace, giving up land that's been conquered in order to end the war, does that seem plausible to you?
I think it is plausible at a certain level. It all depends how much we think the Russian economy, the Russian military are suffering from this, and to what extent they accept that this is not going to be resolved by military means. Now, I've somewhat had my fingers burnt on this before. I mean, it's been my view for some time that Putin would like a ceasefire, and I think that's still probably true. But the issue that's got in the way since Trump was elected and seemingly the diplomatic logjam was broken and talks started in various places, Istanbul, Saudi Arabia and all the rest of it, is that, of course, Putin and the Ukrainians look straight away to the question of, well, OK, so we cease fire, everyone stops where they are at the moment, the line of contact, so-called. What happens on the next day?
Yep.
Now, of course, because both sides wish to shape that to their advantage, Putin effectively to absorb those conquered areas into Russia, Ukraine to deny them that, and to hold open the possibility that they might regain that occupied land, it doesn't then get any further. So that's the basic problem that has to be solved. Now, this question of swapping land, might the Russians pull back in those districts, for example, Sumy, Kharkiv, where they're not claiming to have absorbed, to have taken them into Russia. Mm-hmm. So there's some possibility it might happen there. There's also been a possibility kicked around a bit of so-called disengagement zones, which from the point of view of trying to have a stable ceasefire and something that doesn't just turn into exactly what was going on between 2014 and 2022, which is running skirmishes and trading of artillery and all the rest of it, that there should be disengagement zones, that the forces on both sides should pull back a bit. Well, that idea has been around in negotiations, but we don't know that Putin accepts it now. And of course, logically going into talks, you're not going to show your hand. So I think we're only really going to get down to business in Alaska on Friday, assuming it still happens.
The fact that Europe's taken over from the US as the biggest supplier of military aid to Ukraine. I mean, by some arguments, it has been for a while. It's interesting how little involvement Europe has in this process, and one almost wonders: is there a situation that could emerge whereby Trump and Putin make a deal, and Europe and Ukraine together say no?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we're going around the mulberry bush here, aren't we? We had an episode of this in February when Trump came in, when he mauled Zelensky in the Oval Office, and then there were the talks in Saudi Arabia. We had another episode of it in April, in which all the friends of Ukraine throw up their hands in horror and say it's Munich Mark II. It's a disaster. Trump's about to sell them out. The hard truth is, as we know from these previous episodes, when Zelensky didn't like the way things were going, he can simply say, I'm not going to do it. Now, that means fighting on without the same level of American assistance. But, as we were hearing on that clip from J.D. Vance, American assistance in and of itself is tapering anyway. And the same goes for Europe. I mean, you can sideline Europe and you can brandish some kind of agreement in Alaska, but a lot of the key sanctions, and Russia is looking for sanctions relief in this process, are those imposed by Europe. So you've got to get them on side, both the Ukrainians to make a peace work, clearly, and the Europeans. So that's another sort of element that's been missing so far in this diplomatically.